Kia ora everybody, welcome to this meeting of the Vincent Community Board.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. We have no apologies. There is no public forum. So I'd call for confirmation of the minutes of our meeting of the 11th of October. Somebody, yes.
Just a small point. I'm listed there. It says that I attended various meetings of Central Otago Health Committee. It was actually Heritage Committee.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I'm not that ill.
Anybody else got anything else?
Yeah, small point. I am not a representative for ADMI. It says that Dr. Brown and Ms. Robinson represent ADMI and KCKS. Oh, sorry, respectively. Oh, I forgot.
Yes,
You're good. You're good.
Take
that back.
Take that back. So, with that one amendment, can I have somebody please move the true correct record? Here, second.
Yep.
Anna, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. I just remind you guys of the declaration of interest. In our first report, we're being joined by teams by Malcolm McPherson, who's no relation, and the new chair of the Alexander District Museum, and just like to welcome his worship. Is he coming in or not? Okay. He's got it. And this is on page 21 of your agenda. Now, I think at this stage, once we get Malcolm up on the screen, he's there. I'm not going to see his smiling face.
I'm here, unmuted.
There he
There
is.
he goes.
Yep.
Malcolm, I'll at this stage hand the floor to you, and you can speak to this report.
I'm not quite sure what report you've got, Mr. Chairman.
Well, this is your annual grant report. Back to us, it's the accountability report. Written by not your good self. Nikki, do you want to bring us up to speed of where we're at on this and then introduce the paper?
Yeah. So with the change in grants process, we needed more of an accountability process. So applicants who received $10,000 or more are expected to report back in person to elected members. ADMI obviously did do a presentation before the grant process as well. So you have just heard from them. This is sort of a funny timing with kind of getting into the new policy, I guess. But we still gave them the opportunity to present again today. So there shouldn't be any outliers or very much new information because you have already received it in the application that you assessed in the last meeting.
Okay. Yep. Are you?
By Ryan Budd previously.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
What I can do then is give you a bit of a snapshot about where we are now, taking that previous report and what you've heard from ADMI in the past as read, and give you a very brief update about the current situation and how things look going forward. And that should take about 5 minutes, if you're happy with that.
Great.
Right, let's go. So the first point to make is that ADMI and Central Stories is in a period of transition. As you'll understand, we've got a new chair and 2 additional new trustees, a new manager, Bernice Fenton, and we're about to appoint, we hope, a new front of house person. And there's a bit of change in the volunteer force as well. So it's a real period of change for the trust and for the institution. As well as that, we've had in the recent past, as you'll know, the funding uncertainty and the imminent arrival of a district museum trust, whose purpose we understand, but we don't understand how they will give effect to that. And that's yet to be clarified. So, point made, we're in a period of uncertainty. On the subject of business as usual, we have a small team of volunteers whose work keeps us viable. We've got a finance person, Robin McFarlane, who works a few hours every week to keep our books in order. We've got a conservator collections manager, Sheridan Easdale, who also works a few hours a week doing very valuable and long overdue work behind the scenes. Just a comment from me, an editorial comment if you like. The idea that this museum could function on a volunteer workforce, as others in the district apparently do, is in our view nonsense. There are a number of roles in a museum of this size and complexity that only professionals can perform. The other museums should be levelled up. It's nonsense to think that we should be levelled down. Also, business as usual, the gallery is booked for much of next year, and the Arts Society have just confirmed that they intend to hold their annual Blossom Festival show in our galleries next year. They were very happy with this year's event. It was a good venue for their purposes. We have a gap in the galleries plural, in January and February, and we're actively working on a summer festival to be called Summer at Central Stories, anchored by exhibitions in the galleries and other events, and we're about to kick that into place at rather short notice. Looking to the future, I'm interested in the board's opinion, your opinion, about revisiting the service level agreement idea. I support close reporting of performance, and if the board is interested, the Vincent board is interested, we could resurrect the historical service level agreement and timetable routine reports. I think that's good for both parties. It's certainly good for management discipline in an organisation like this. Just to finish, I have reports written by Brian Budd and Diane Duncan that are now historical. If you wanted me to summarise those, I could, but I gather you probably got all you need to know about what happened prior to this period of uncertainty. I'd like to finish by thanking the board for their support for the ADMI. Without you, there would be no us, and that's not an exaggeration, and the district would be the poorer for it. And that's my presentation, such as it is. Happy to answer questions, I guess, Mr. Chairman.
Question, members? As Nikki surmised at the beginning, we have seen this before. Russell.
No, I was just saying the service level agreement, whether or not it's a formal service level agreement, but we're going to be reviewing and having a workshop at the end of this meeting on grants policy in any case. I was just interested perhaps hearing from you, Malcolm, about what you felt about places like the museum fitting into the current contestable model.
Yeah, I mean, telling you your business and maybe telling you to suck eggs. My opinion is that in a local authority, heritage and history and the museum sector should be core business. It's as important to the well-being of a community as good drainage and good water and safe roads, in my view. It ought to be, if you follow that line of thought, a line item in the community boards and the council's budgets. I think the notion that we face uncertainty around funding on an annual basis is really unsettling to an organisation that needs stability. We need to be able to offer professionals careers, not 12-month gigs. And if we're funded on a contestable basis and our funding is at risk on an annual cycle, it's very hard to retain good people. So, in my opinion, it ought to be a line item. It ought to be considered as core business. It ought not to be an issue that's debatable or debated. And in most other local authorities, probably all other local authorities, that's the case.
Thank you, Malcolm. Anybody else like to comment? Thank you. Look, the recommendation is we receive the report. Again, I will put that. Does somebody second? Charlene, thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thanks,
Thank you
Malcolm.
very much, folks. Thank you for listening. All the best.
Cheers. Next item on the agenda is 21.9.3 is the Blythe Street Museum relocation of the Blythe Police lockup. Christina, the floor is yours.
Yeah,
All right, so the purpose of this report is to consider approving a budget for the relocation of the Clyde police lockup before the adjacent vacant section is developed. Through the report, we looked at 4 options and staff have landed on a recommendation to move the Clyde police lockup from sooner rather than later and shift it up to the Clyde railway station, or near the Clyde railway station on the railway station recreation reserve. It'll be over a cost of a budget of 46,000 and to be funded from the Vincent General Reserves. The reason why we've recommended this option is because it provides the least amount of risk that the lockup will be moved twice. As the report states, this is not a preferred option of the Clyde Historical Museum Group. I've provided a copy of the report to Andy Ritchie, who's the chair of the Clyde Museum Group, so she can have the opportunity to review it before the meeting. Also provided her with the opportunity to have a session in the public session. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it because she was just too busy with all of us at the moment. But I did call her this morning just to catch up on where things were at her end. And from their end, they are still very keen to have the lockup in front of the Blythe Street Museum, as they feel that they're really focusing their attention on that at the moment. However, she can see our reasons for why recommending it to go up to the Clyde Museum. And that is really where they're going to be focusing, and all the energy is on the Blythe Street Museum because they're still really unsure where we're going with the Briarherb factory redevelopment. That's being put on hold, and she still feels that even if that went to keep that, it will still be years. I said that I'd pass those comments on to the board. She's unable to attend, but if you have any questions.
Money, the reserves, my suggestion would be that the money actually comes out of the pot of money that we were going to use for the design concept drawing things which were put off hold, which was I can't find the detail of this in the financials, but there's when we approved or said that we weren't going to go ahead with that money was going to come out of the Earns Crew, Mania Kia reserves and development account. There's no, I mean, we were given a pretty clear message last meeting that reserves were, general reserves were sort of out of bounds, but we were going to spend 94,000 on the design concepts, which are not going to go ahead or they're put on hold. So maybe that's a better place for the.
So I have consulted with the finance team on where the best place for the funding to come from, and this was their recommend. This was part of the conversation, the recommendation. If you look on page 51, you're quite correct that 94,000 is to be funded from the Earns Crew, Mania Kia reserves and development account. I can't comment, and maybe I can pass it on back to Leanne around. Obviously now we're the Vincent, and maybe they've amalgamation or not, or but the recommendation was the Vincent's reserves to be looked at for this in this case.
Can I just have a general clarification around the reserves? Because it's mentioned at the last meeting, we were clearly told, and I'm not saying I have a problem, but we were clearly told not to use reserves, and now we are.
No, that's not, and if you're implying that I said don't use reserves, that's not the message I said. What I recommend, reserves are not just a bucket to make your budget work. Reserves are there for a rainy day, for special situations. So you don't just use reserves, for instance, because you don't want to say no to a whole pile of grants, so let's just look into reserves because once you use them, they're gone. If you're using them for, so we look at so when staff come to me and say, can we use reserves? The first question I look at is, what is the purpose of the activity? And what have we got in our buckets that we've rated for the different things that we rate for? And I'm not talking at that level of if we budget to do something and then we remove it, because we don't always, depending if it's CapEx or OpEx, we may not have put it back into the reserve. We'd only said in the reserve if it was an OpEx thing that we rated for, because we rate for our capital by depreciation. That only happens after the event of.
Well, design concepts were not CapEx, obviously.
So I'm not sure which one that fell in. I'll have to go back to that one because I do recall the conversation, but I don't know exactly which we will just have that in the activities for rating, so I need to go and check that.
I think it's in this report that it was the 94K, which was budgeted. It's in this report that said that came from the Ernst Clue Manufacture Reserve Development account.
Okay, and that's fine. If we then chose not to do that, which we did at the time, the board asked us to put that on hold, that would make logical sense. I don't have a problem with that. But yes, we are getting much lower on our reserves, and we're getting to a point that across the collective council, we're moving into debt. And that's going to be a first time for our council to recognise that. That's in our year one of the long-term plan, that we will, by the end of this financial year, we will be in debt to around the tune of 25 million. That's our first signal that we've, so every time you use reserves, it's not there to use another day. It's particularly if it's things that don't, particularly if it's things that are operational where you can't then go and retrospectively rate or depreciate to top those reserves back up again.
But what's something that was important to the board, that the board felt was really important, we do have the right to use those reserves?
Yes, in line with the reserves policy and any other policies and directive from council, because at the end of the day, boards always have to follow council's.
I'm just going to go to Louise for comment on that, but I want to say something. Lynn, this is one of these cases where reserve funding does get used, because it's one of those items. Leanne talks about a rainy day fund, right? This is one of the things that we haven't managed to plan or budget for, because it's sort of.
It was a risk of putting the project on hold.
Oh,
that this could be a risk, and we discussed it because I you were involved in that discussion.
It would end up being landlocked.
Yeah, so the landlocked is quite a legal term. So when we started talking about it, we changed it from landlocked to trapped. Landlocked is a legal term, which means you've got no access to it. That's not correct.
No, it's trapped.
And what it meant, well, in some senses it isn't trapped. You just need a really, 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 really big crane.
Yeah.
Really big crane.
60 grams with the crane.
Yeah.
Okay. Louise.
So it's just pointed out that there was $94,000 in the 1920 annual plan to fund the concept plan, so that'll be
2020.
Yes.
Russell, and that was 1920, so that's gone.
2020.
2020.
1920.
Oh, the line item is.
Oh, 2019, 2020. Okay, I'm with you now.
That's a lot of records to have gone back.
So presumably because you didn't progress the concept plan, that has gone back into reserves.
Yes.
And I would have said, whilst this was something that's occurred, because that hasn't progressed, the board very clearly had a plan of development, because you had a significant funding and a long-term plan for this. So this isn't some random side thought that you're having. It's part of your museum development, where you've done feasibility studies, you've done heritage days, you've done a lot of work in this space, and this is part of that project. But because it's taking a slightly different shape than it did because you didn't progress the concept plans, this is why it's in front of you now. So it's consistent with that piece of work. It's not a random thing.
Yep, that's understood.
Now, did any Russell's had his say? Yeah. Any comments?
I just wondered if the redevelopment project were to not go ahead, would the railway station still be the most appropriate place for the locker?
So that is a part of, the consideration discussion, and they're going to put within the report. And you could say, yes, it still is, because we still have a museum up in the railway station. But what the Clyde Historical Museum is sort of saying, well, is that didn't go ahead, and we still focus really on the Blythe Street, then maybe that is the better position. But all direction that we've received so far, do nothing. As Louise said, there's a whole lot of work that's been going on, and there's not an option to simply do nothing. We have to do something with the Briarhead Factory Museum. We have to fund it somehow, and the mechanism to do that is via the Blythe Street Museum. So the development is or all our research and all our work has been going like this up to the Briar Herb Factory, but because there was some questions around that, it was put on hold. Does that answer your question?
I guess the change that's been made, or the change that's happened since then, of course, has been the decision to go ahead with a new museum at Cromwell as part of the community centre there, and presumably I would imagine some of the work of the new museum trust will also be looking at the big picture of the number on location of museums, that the whole decision on whether or not the museum at Clyde should be a new one could be revisited in any case in the future.
Excuse me, through the chair, that's exactly the piece of work that is currently happening, and there will be many options coming in front of the council on that.
Just as
Russell, thank you. Just, I'd like to hear from others around the table. No, any comments?
Oh, sorry, I was just sidetracked. What's the comment?
I just wonder if you have any comments on what was proposed to do with the old lockup as far as.
Oh, no, I can see it has the vision, so I'm quite okay with it.
Yeah, pretty obvious.
No, I guess I just, you've shown photos of the interior. It's got stuff in it that obviously makes it pretty inaccessible at the moment. And I'm assuming, and I guess this is a question, regardless of whether it gets moved to the wee grassy reserve or up to Briar Factory, Briar Time Factory? Briar Herb Factory, thank you. Briar Herb Factory, it will be cleared and made accessible so people can step inside and get a sense of the history of the business.
I guess from the community group's point of view, it's easier for them to do that in the current scenario in front of the Blythe Street Museum.
Right.
But if we're directing the development up to the Briar Herb Factory, in the long run, that's going to be the best site for it. And they've got some really neat ideas.
Cool.
Andy Ritchie is very creative.
And my other question around that as well, I know that there's some buildings there which require demolition. So will it be cited so that that demolition can take place without that building being affected?
Absolutely. While we haven't landed on an exact position, one suggested space is when you come into the car parking and you look straight ahead and you see the Clyde railway station. If you look to the right down that end, that could be a posi. Now that's totally away from the Briar Herb Factory. Cool. But what we might have to do is relook at our museum brief when we come to do it, or our design brief for that, and actually go, you know what, we've spent enough money on this in a good predominant place space now, and going that other level where we had in the design brief of even putting it inside the next which was a great idea, you know, that maybe we're not going to go that step.
Sure. And actually it's really, well, it's right on the rail trail then as well, isn't it, if it was up in that top right corner?
Yeah, and while I haven't spoken to She Bikes, He Bikes, they are already opening that museum space here, so I sort of thought, I haven't approached them or haven't done anything until we've got direction here. But the potential is that they can be sort of caretakers and help the museum out. But the museum group will have to come on board to, as you say, clear out, get it once we get up there and to do some interpretation.
Thank you.
Oh yeah,
yes. Oh yeah. I think it's been basically cleared now. Yeah, because I actually helped do it.
Roger.
I note that it doesn't have a door, which is an interesting way of presenting a jail without or lock-up without a door. To me, the value of a place, of a thing like that, is that someone can go in and they can feel what it would be like to actually be in a lock-up in, you know, a previous era. That if the lockup doesn't have a door, it's missing part of that feel, that story.
So I'm a bit confused on the door. There is a door there, but it's not the original lockup door. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
I think through my memory serves me correct. I think there is a spare door in Harrowtown somewhere that perhaps the museum group could tap into, and now sort of move that to look into. Door.
Bishop, you want to make a comment?
I just had a question and a comment, and I must have missed it somewhere, but I'm not understanding the relevance of the water connection with the Blythe Street. If that was the place, why does there need to be a water connection?
Yeah, sure. So when I looked at the plans for that piece of land, what's actually happened is that of the irrigation, there's actually a private line from the irrigation into the building across the piece of land that we're being put the dock up on. So regardless, at some point in the future, we're going to have to correct that and have an own line into the building, especially if we repurpose either south. At the time to save on meter cost on the formula.
So in terms of the cost of putting it at Blythe Street at 50,000, that's not really a cost that's in relation to this because it's going to have to be spent at some time anyway?
It will need to be done at some time anyway, depending on where we land on the leasing or selling, but I think we should correct it at some point. Yeah. But the need to correct it now is only because the building was going to be put on top of that, which is never a good thing, isn't it?
And I guess just the only other comment I pick up on Anna saying that the museum site has the benefit of being on the rail trail, but this site has the benefit of being on the Lake Dunstan Trail, which I kind of look at a historic building there that could signpost up to the new museum or to the old museum or whatever. It's kind of at a bit of a junction between both of the trails, and just the cheer value of that. I don't know, that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Just to clarify the reserve, 4111, which is the reserve that Christine has got in her report, is the full official title is General Revenues and Development in Home and Hair Care. And actually, which is the one that the original 96K was proposed for. We just tend not to use the E and the M as much anymore.
I'm happy to move that.
I just have one more question. So in option 2, if the cost of the water works is taken out, what would be the cost of?
Is that water? So that when I got the check out from the house moving costs, he said that it doesn't matter whether it was there or up the road, his cost would be the same. The difference in those two prices is that water main connection.
And what is that cost?
Off the top of my head, when I broke it down, I think it's about 4,000 of that.
Just a comment that took the, if it's up at the railway station, it will be opened on a regular basis through, if he bikes can come to the, to the party as they do with the little room at the end of and that works extremely well. The disadvantage of it being down beside the museum is that it would be the problem of opening and closing it because the volunteers are not there to do it. Yeah. But I just wonder, is there any quid pro quo that we could give she bikes, he bikes? I know they've been looking for sort of storage space up there. Is the way that we could assist them with storage space in the good shed, please?
So the good shed at this point isn't safe. But I've already been in contact with me and it's not safe. Trying to restrict as many people in there as possible at the moment. In terms of quid pro quo, I actually think it adds to their business as well. Having another museum for some another little space to be opening up and showing their clients through. That's where I see it. As I said, I haven't had those conversations with she bikes, he bikes. So they're conversations that probably the museum would have with them rather than myself. But I do see there's advantages for that.
Okay. We put a container inside that. You've done, okay.
So I'm just sorry, another question. So if we like signage like yours up down across the
So I haven't planned in the interpretation panel. I believe that would be sort of inside, like the idea. I haven't seen what the vision is from the Clyde Museum group, but I would say there would be some sort of interpretation somewhere. I mean, if that was a condition of going ahead, then I could look at putting some interpretation panel outside as well. He has it within the management plan. Yeah,
That's no further discussion, no more questions of Christina or others. Lily has moved A, B, C and D. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Roger, seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Christina, thank you. Going to send out an invitation to us all to watch it get lifted up.
Wear your hard hats and yeah.
Go,
Take well back and you bring the coffee.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Item 21.9.4, page 135 of your agenda, the Alexandra Rugby Football Club's power count. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Before we start this, I just want to make two things I'm going to say. One, both His Worship and myself made an undertaking to the rugby club we would invite them along to this meeting. Unfortunately, they haven't managed that invitation. I would like to talk with this board and the rugby club to this report. What I'm going to propose is we let it lay on the table until our February meeting, so we can have a conversation with the club members and get to the bottom of this and come to some resolution which works for both parties. So there we are. Ian's looking at me rather quizzically. Through the chair.
As long as if they're proposing something, our staff may need time to visit what they're proposing, because I know that Gordon has done a lot of work on this, and I know I've had a conversation with him and I understand where it comes from. So if they come up with something that's completely different to this.
Well, they had the opportunity as of last night, I understand, to see the report. And I would extend an invitation to them if they want to comment on it, to do so prior to the next meeting. So if that could, I know they met last night and discussed it because Wayne got a phone call at 6:30 requesting, with an email at 6:30, I should say, requesting access to the public forum. I don't think this is an item for a public forum. I think it's an item to be to discuss with those guys in a little bit more of a informal sense, to get a feeling for it. So if staff could communicate back to them, that's the story. If they've got anything else they want to add or say to Gordon's original report, let them come back to us and then we can go forward and see what happens in February.
So just to be clear, you want to report back in February after the consultation with or communication with the rugby club?
It could be the same report.
Right.
It's just the fact is they haven't been given the opportunity to address it.
Do you wish to be part of that conversation, or are you happy for staff to have that conversation with the rugby club?
The conversation that I wound up having with them yesterday essentially is, firstly, they haven't seen the report and they want to be able to put their perspective, once they've seen the report on the report, that they'd like to do that in person to the board. So be that at the public forum at February's meeting, or probably more sensibly, right before the report is represented, and then there's any further work for staff here. But what I see here is one awkward attitude due respect to staff. It's one side of the story.
Yeah.
And what I don't want us to get, and Mr. Chairman's the same, is they go, but that's not our point of view. We represent the community, and the community group here should be able to come and say, well, actually, no, we see this somewhat different. No, they don't. I don't know, because they haven't seen the report. I'm sure.
So it could be an opportunity for staff and elected members and rugby club to sit around in an informal situation and have parley before it comes back to the board in a formal sense for a decision.
Well, I think it has to be one or the other, Martin, but I would submit that it's probably better to do it in a public setting. And
yes.
Either in a public forum and or as part of the meeting. So similar to what Dr. McPherson was able to do earlier today. Well, here's the report, here's our take on it, and then they can either go and sit there. Or they
I agree.
Because the concern is not the report, it's the fact they haven't had time to digest the report.
Through the chair would have happened if they'd just been a bit earlier so that we could have organised it for today, but one didn't have enough time to put them in the public forum.
We were only found out about it yesterday.
So then they get you to take time off work.
And, you know, they're all professional working people too, and that's a bit of a challenge for all states.
Yeah.
It's all right. I think they'll be fine with February.
Through the chair, I just wonder if perhaps it could be a little bit more clarified from the report. Some of the things that I didn't understand from there were what were the arrangements, you know, with the original leasing and whatever, was it power included, or you know, it wasn't clear whose meters were there and who was paying for the, you know, there was a lot of things that weren't particularly clear in the report.
It should be right in time.
And that's because there's no agreements that we can find.
Yeah, no, there was no agreement specifically for the business when it was going to be hooked up to the lighting control box. There was no written agreement there, as far as I could tell. But what actually happened prior to that? You know, was it a lease and they paid a lease that the power was included, or it wasn't included?
Trust
Yeah.
Before that. So, and that,
Yeah.
you know, looking at records are not.
But if the claim extends back to the period where that would apply.
Russell,
Mm.
let's not have this conversation now, we'll have it later. Thank you, in February meeting.
No, just
Once, and then some of those questions you may be able to answer by the rugby club. Certainly with all due respect to Gordon, he's tried to find that information out that just doesn't exist.
Mr. Chairman, can I just get a clarification? Sorry for my ignorance. What is a bunker in this particular context?
The bunker is at Molyneux Park, it's under the scoreboard, and it's where they keep the some lawn mowing equipment and the roller, not the roller, the squeegee stuff that they run out for the cricket.
So some sort of.
Yeah.
It's built into the embankment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Look, guys, thank you for the work, putting that brief, but I'd like to see the rugby football club here. So, we'll do this again in February. Can I have somebody move? Thank you, Charlene. Second, Anna. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. So we'll stay there until February. The financial reports. Hello, welcome.
Okay, so I'm here to report on the financial to the 30th of September 2021. So the start of this financial year has been a little bit sluggish. So you'll find that there's quite a bit of a favourable variance in the expenses. So the operating result finishes with a favourable variance of $269,000 as at 30 September. The main comments for that would be the other capital contributions, which is in dollars unbudgeted for. That's a rollover of ending for the over community centre bathroom from the last financial year, so it's not additional funding. And you'll see that. The grants has also got an unfavourable variance of $21,000. That doesn't mean that we've actually overspent in our grants, it's just phasing of our budgets. And that relates to the loss and festival grant, which I understand is being returned as you can.
So that will move that to favourable. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you guys go the grants process, which I'm not sure if it's this meeting or a prior meeting, they'll change again when you allocate out your groups of grants for the year. So the CapEx has an overall favourable variance of 81,000 at the moment, with 18% of the total. The main one that stands out there is the Open Community Centre, which has a unfavourable variance of $110,000. So this is towards the OPA bathroom upgrade, which is partially funded on the EV funding that was discussed, and it's due for completion in November. Are there any questions?
Members, any questions of Don?
No, just a comment perhaps, right up the top where we talk about the, I think there's the grants there. It would be sort of helpful if we had that able to be divided into, I know it's probably both community and promotions grants. I think that's, but yeah.
Yeah.
If that could be divided into those two things, it would be,
Okay.
I just thought it might be a little bit helpful.
Yeah.
So split into community and promotional.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move that we receive this report. Do I have a seconder? Yeah. Those in favour?
Right.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Donna. Your worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Immediately following the last board meeting, I had 3 coffee and chats in the ward at Marco, Alex and Clyde, and they were like the whole raft. I just did them very quietly attended. Very few people turned up, which is at total odds to every other time in the last 5 years I've done these things. So I'm not sure whether people are consulted out after LTPs and spatial plans and everything else, or whether everybody's busy, or indeed some are staying at home unless they have to because they're still a little bit COVID weary. I don't know, but it was quite remarkably quite time, but nothing to report back to the board from those. I attended the Dunstan High School charity golf tournament, which raised, I think it was $22,000 for sports at the high school. It was extremely well run, and everything about it was good apart from my golf. Probably won't be invited back. I attended and emceed an event that some members were at for the Evening More Central Otago at Orchard Gardens. It was a very successful night, very exciting, and great to be able to present the work of the board that I chair to people of Central at that Vincent-based venue. I'll be leading a discussion in Cambrians tomorrow evening for the community to get an understanding of the impact of the Water Services Act on its water supply, and that followed a meeting that Mr. Chair and I had out there with members of the community before the last meeting. And I've, as I'm sure you all have, dealt with a number of emails in relation to the half-mile Walden Pines removal. It's been a lot since we last met. Open to any questions?
How about the 3 Waters appointment?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It may prove to be an exercise in futility, but I'm not going into it with that attitude. I think, as I've commented publicly, the reforms are happening, and so you can either sit there and scream from the rooftops that you're not happy about it, or you can get inside and try to effect sensible change if sensible change is possible. So it's a very limited brief as to the scope that we can play in. The government's made it very plain that large tracts of what they're doing are not going to be open to debate by the working group, but there are parts that are. So we haven't had our first meeting yet. It's going to be an interesting time and an awful amount of extra work. And a number of people have commented to me, well, you'll be getting well paid for it. But no, it's all for the love of
meetings.
The love of meetings. Oh, that's it. Yes, well said, Martin. Thank you. But yeah, it's going to be quite challenging. As one of 19 members of what could be quite a divided group, there'll be a lot of strong opinions in the room. I don't mean to say we'll be divided, but there'll be a lot of strong personalities in the room with various thoughts. So it's going to be an interesting time.
I mean, you're obviously there as the mayor of CODC.
No, I'm not. So the terms of reference that I signed state specifically that no member is there. I should get the wording totally correctly. You're not there, so yes, I am, but I'm not there representing the views of Central Otago or Central Otago District Council. I am obviously there because I'm there. And that's a funny old tightrope to walk, but realistically, how does one represent the views of Central Otago on the 3 Waters reforms? Because
Isn't that your job?
And
I think when that is your job.
that is my job. Yeah, I've got to interpret what the thoughts are, but it's not going to be an easy one. It's an interesting tightrope to walk.
Can you remind us how much time have you got in that group?
7th of March is when we have to report back to the government.
So long as it?
Got about 8 meetings scheduled in the next month, 7 meetings.
Where's the holidays?
Takes on a while.
Is the, do you get any sense of what the community support is for? I mean, obviously, the chance to communicate and consult with the community has been taken away from us completely by the mandate. But do you get any sense of what the community generally feels about the either about the proposal or the mandating?
It's a very tricky one, isn't it? Because certainly I've had no one say to me the mandation is a good thing. And I've probably had several dozen people speak to me about it, but also represent 24,000 people. So is it a situation where most people haven't got a firm opinion, or most people have a firm opinion, they just haven't expressed it? And I would have to say that regrettably many opinions are formed on a significant degree of ignorance is the wrong word to use, lack of knowledge. The government, and I've challenged the minister directly on this, that the government's completely failed not only to argue the case for change, which is a compelling case. We all know, and every major political party agrees, that we cannot continue and that the status quo no longer exists. They failed to establish the understanding of that in the public's mind, and beyond that, they completely failed to get in the public minds why they believe their solution is the best one. So it's a very difficult position to be in when you've spent probably thousands of hours working on the Three Waters and have a knowledge that you get after that amount of time to try to engage with the public and have, you know, I've done 4 lengthy presentations now at various groups, and they come away going, I didn't realise any of that. That changes my perspective a little bit, or a lot. And also people who have watched the video series that we've put together get a better understanding of if nothing else, the complexities of the issue. When you say to people that the government figures of how much it's going to, by their estimate, cost if we're in or if we're out, back when we had a choice, which are nonsensical and based on assumptions, but if you have the assumption as to how much work they believe we have to do, so to get up to spec, and if you have the efficiencies that the government claim this new organisation will achieve, the people of 2051 in Central Otago will still be $900 a year better off than the now. And when you say that to people, that their rates, you know, that's a $900 difference, they go, well, hang on. And those are things I think that have been lost in the whole discussion. But the reforms are extraordinarily unpopular, I recognise that. Yeah, for whatever reason.
I don't think there was such a huge information gathering exercise that we all thought that we were going to have the opportunity to consult on at a certain period of time when the government advised, but we lost that opportunity. Could we have consulted anymore? I don't think so. You did a little more.
It's a good question, I mean, it's an interesting perspective, and there's certainly been criticism of myself as mayor and the council along with it that we didn't consult, but there's 2 things. Firstly, we only had a draft proposal to consult on, so that's ridiculous. If we continued down the path that did we anticipate it? I think we equally anticipated what would happen did happen, but we were led to believe that there would be consultation. If we'd constantly consulted on the draft and then went back and consulted on the final thing, well, that's awfully confusing for a public. It's over consultation. It's wasted money because it's still $50,000 to do a consultation. So I'm entirely comfortable with the situation, but the way that we moved it along. And I think, you know, people say, oh, the government's mandated it. That's shocking, and yes, to an extent, although it wasn't surprising. But on the other hand, the number of councils that took a deliberate stance against the reforms and in many ways led their public down a path that we didn't force the government's hand. They had a number of councils saying we're out before the decision even had to be made. And so, well, I bet things would have been done differently by everyone if they had their time again. Although I wouldn't, in the circumstances that we had, do anything different. Our job up until the time that the government made the announcements was to get our public in the best position it could for when the consultation happened. I don't know if, you know, I'm very proud of the work we did on the 17 videos. It was a lot of work, and I think they give a very good summary of bite-sized pieces before the decision had to be made that now doesn't have to be made. Which is a frustration.
I seem to remember, is there an open letter going to the minister from this council in any case?
Yes,
is
that news this Thursday. It just took a little while to get 12 different minds and drafting the words.
So to agree on one single statement, yes.
Oh, it was a very good consensus, but it was just some tweaking of words between trial counsel.
So it'll be difficult for you to be able to, not knowing what the content of the open letter is, but if the letter is critical or whatever and has got a stance, it's going to be quite difficult personally if you're there not representing the council, but sort of representing the council.
You don't do these jobs because they're easy. The letter expresses the views of the council and myself, the council that I lead, and myself as to the mandation that we're not happy about. That won't come as any surprise to Minister Mahu. And to various aspects of the reforms that we're not happy about. Some of those come within the gambit of the group that I'm on. We haven't said you need to do such and such. We just said we are not happy about this. So we're not happy about the nature of the governance at the moment as it's proposed. We're also not happy about the continued risks of privatisation. It's outside of my gambit. We're not happy about the degree of consumer protection, which is again outside the gambit of that working group. So I think where you prematurely yourself to get yourself in trouble is where you say you should not do this specific thing. So you should not, if we had have said, for instance,
should that letter go to the community boards rather than have to go to the
sure. I mean,
we certainly get a lot of comment and questions.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
That's a good point. I'll get that out tonight and tomorrow. I'm just thinking whether the final mock-up's been done. What's today, Tuesday? I'll just make see the final mock-up.
It would have gone, it's hopefully
lunchtime today.
It's gone by lunchtime now, otherwise something about.
No, I'll get that out now, just haven't seen it come through.
I was just thinking about the cafe meetings, perhaps with COVID, has that changed a wee bit, the more people watching the Facebook Live quick and.
Yeah, possibly that as well, actually. That's possibly a good point, because the Facebook Live still gets you get Facebook to work with. I struggled with last night.
Facebook Live.
It's a lot of, it does get a lot of people, so maybe the people who want to make contact there just finding a way of doing it through that. Yeah, it's a very effective meeting.
Any further questions of this worship before I ask them to move this report?
Just that comment that we've discussed already around filling that void while you're going through that process with that group. I know that there's been several people raise it to me, and one person in particular just saying any information that's there around that pre-waters reform, it'd be really good to have that information going out as much as possible so that the whisper and the the
misinformation
and that void being filled with the misinformation.
The misinformation, which is either unfortunate or absolutely deliberate, and in many cases it has been absolutely deliberate, is really unfortunate. Look, I haven't had the conversation yet as to what our degrees of confidentiality are, but I well imagine I won't be able to come to the board or the council or the public and say, here's where we're at, folks, before the report goes to the Crown. I think I'll be under some restrictions.
Yeah, I guess it's just making it
but
really clear.
Anything else that comes, because there are two other working groups that may come out with results soon, but I think it's going to be tie-ho in terms of where we're at until those groups go back to the government, and the government will decide what they're going to do with their advice, and that's when we'll all find out. We might have enough.
Right, well, I'll move this worship's report if I haven't seconded it. All in favour? Aye. Thank you. Now, B, council meeting, there's a couple of interesting. I'm pleased Tim didn't mention, but it gives me a chance to talk about them. We've had a look at our smoke-free and vape-free policy and brought that up to speed. So now all our green spaces and areas outside cafes and that are not only smoke-free, but they are also vape-free. One of the questions which I've had a number of people say, have we got any control over vape shops, which we seem to have an abundance of in town at present? And no, we don't, because the policy doesn't restrict the retail aspects. It just, the only way we control is where people can actually vape or smoke. And again, and some of the information coming out of Health South about the proliferation of vaping, especially in high schools. It's really quite scary, and I don't sound like a complete hypocrite when I'm being an ex-smoker, but you know, really, it is. You're not an ex-vaper though. No, I never vaped at all. No. So that was quite good. Lots of work going on. We're given updates on Rma reforms. And the feedback came from the Waste Services Review. Recall, we went out and canvassed people's thoughts on sizes of wheelie bins and frequency of collections. And as good a buy into that as there was into the long-term plan. And some going to be seeing smaller bins and green waste collections by the looks of it, depending on how it progresses when the contract's finished. And then the other one, which was long debate, was on the council mark. You may recall 2 members of the public have written to council requesting and council mark is to like a coal mark review, and it was a lengthy debate, and it's basically put on the back burner until the new year when we get some more. We heard all the negative aspects of why you want, because of staff time, costs involved and things like that, but we're just waiting to hear, and His Worship's going to be talking to mayors of other districts who have actually gone through it, come back with some positive notes on it. Hearings panels are getting longer and more intense. We had a good one earlier on with the bike park at Matangi, and it's just like really exciting what's being proposed up there. A lot of interest community-wide in what's going on, and it's going to be a major asset. December hearings panel we're having too, because there's just such a huge amount of work coming on, as far as consents and subdivisions and that sort of thing. A lot of work going in that space. We have an ILM workshop on wastewater, our future, and this is one of 3 hosted throughout the district about where our waste was going. And then, but yes, it's been busy, and it's not getting any quieter, especially in that RMA space, the hearing space. It's getting really, really busy. And less and less resource. And less and less resource, because we have lost some very valuable team members, and it just we're not hearing the frustration yet, but we may in the new year. People have been, I know the feedback that I'm getting from developers and from builders is that they're pleasantly spooked, especially ones who work across borders. We're still on really good reputation as far as our consenting process is concerned, but that may change. You want to add any comment to that?
We're doing our best to cover the gaps through engaging different consultants and actually reorganising some of the team internally. So some of the staff in the regulatory space are actually helping the planning team in the short term. So and we've got some ideas how to get more administrative support, but we're incredibly stretched. We're a couple of key positions down, so still working on.
Thank you. Members' reports. Oh, yes, sorry. Somebody move my report, please. Thank you. Second it? All in favour? Carry. Members' report. Roger.
I attended the ADMI AGM. That was a lot of hot-blooded supporters of the museum there. It was quite a fractious event, certainly a large turnout. I attended as an observer to ADMI board meetings, attended a business breakfast meeting with the Christchurch Airport Plans and Terrace, an executive from Christchurch Airport Company came down and presented their plans. I ran a series of 4 sessions, Youth Relay sessions on climate change. The first was addressed by Dr. Jim Salinger, who's a climate scientist, actually living in quite handy in Queenstown. Had 2 academics from Otago University talking about economic, ethical and political aspect of climate change. And then I was the final speaker in the series, speaking on paleoclimatology. I also went to the Last Chance Irrigation Company AGM, which went very smoothly. Thank you.
I also attended the AGM for the Last Chance Irrigation Company and failed to put it in my report. Thanks for the reminder, Roger. Not much really to report on. I've had a really busy month transitioning from my Enviro Schools role into full-time work with Otago catchment community. We ran the first of our, and it's not really related to us, but worth noting, we're in the first of our forums for catchment groups in Ormako last Thursday. It was really awesome to sit around with land users, farmers, water catchment care groups, and feel a really positive vibe in the room. So no talk about water quantity, lots of talk about water quality, and we did a really exciting site tour to the Thompson's Creek Wetland Project. They've got quite a healthy funding package to assist in the restoration of that site, and it's going to be, if they go ahead with it, and it's still a bit of an if, it's going to be really exciting to have that there directly off the rail trail, and they are proposing putting a walkway through it, which will be wheelchair friendly. It's 5 minutes walk from the town itself, and could potentially be linked to that trails network from Ormako. I know there's a trail being proposed through to Ophir as well. I think this could be added to that map. So that was a really cool thing. Alex Community House Strategy Planning meeting, and it was a great discussion around the strategy documents and the vision of Community House, and Keep Alex Clyde beautiful. I helped hang the baskets on the Golden Block a couple of weeks ago, which I'm sure you'll all agree look great.
I didn't see any cones or yellow vests.
Oh, yeah, there was an orange vest, not a yellow vest.
There's always one.
And well, I managed to get Alan Johnston down off the ladder and said, why don't I climb the ladder? So I think it was a success.
And how you managed it was Alan's 103 and he should not be going up those ladders. You're right. And I'm always having arguments, but he's one of those charming characters in this village. If he stops doing things, he'll stop doing things.
That's right. He's determined.
And they do look absolutely stunning. And I think even the reprobates are not knocking them around. I've got it's taken a few years for people to get used to them being there. Now there. Charlene.
In the month for meetings, so the Community House Strategy one, the Blossom Festival we put up around maybe doing something, maybe not doing something, Arts Council, CODA meeting, where of course we were thrilled that the council had adopted the smoke factory policy. And yes, you're correct, there is issues at school, but there's also issues on public transport with vaping. And so supporting the bus companies to create policies around that. And in line with the smoke factory thing is also, as of the 28th of November, if you know anyone who smokes or vapes in a vehicle, that they will be prosecuted if you have anyone in your vehicle under the age of 18. If you smoke or vape in your vehicle. So 28th of November. So if you know anyone who does that, we remind her not to. The fine is $150 each time you are caught. So if you have a 19-year-old who's driving their 18-year-old friend around and they're vaping, they can be prosecuted. So yeah, timely reminder around that.
I assume there will be some media campaign highlighting that.
Yeah, it's on TV at the moment. Yes. Yeah, Facebook and everything. Yeah. I have a million smelly things for cars if people want to me. Based around that. And fantastic to host. You might have seen that the bike park was closed over the weekend as the BMX Club hosted the Central Otago Champs. So we had 150 riders from around the South Island attend. Which was a good influx of people, so about 400 people, 500 people to our town, spending money and having a good time in the rain. It's about it for me.
It was a bit wet, wasn't it?
No, it was horrendous. Yeah, it was great. And hats off to Cycling New Zealand and the BMX community for actually being one of the groups who have worked out how to make it work. So every club is put into a bubble and no more than 100 people in your bubble. You must wear your mask entering your bubble. Your bubble can only arrive at a certain time. Riders have to have all their gear on and are sent out from bubbles at different times into chutes. And the same thing with packing down is that you can't only leave in your bubble. So you'll wait until it's your bubble's turn. And so there's been 3 massive competitions, Canterbury champs, Dunedin champs and Central Otago, where we've made it work. So it's hopefully a good thing for people to see that you can do this. You've just got to think a little bit different.
Yeah, the mountain bike fraternity have done similar things with some of their events where they just.
Yeah, so Cycling New Zealand.
Yeah, and they really have, you know, because I queried something which is going on and then they showed us that it really is managed really well.
I mean, it takes a lot of planning, but now that the plans are kind of there, other groups can adapt it and take it. And yeah, hopefully it encourages people to maybe.
Don't want you even hinting that we could do a Blossom Festival.
No, I'm not sure we can have bubbles at the Blossom Festival, but for sporting events, it can happen.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
No. And it's good because it means we're not missing out on those things.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean.
Because you know how much income your weekend generated around here, the motels and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just made me think about the Changi station. I didn't quite hear whether you said that went through or not. But
I can't possibly comment because I don't know whether it was, they even know what the result is.
Oh no, that's what I was just thinking about the crank groups.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's going ahead.
That's going ahead.
Yeah.
So that's a huge overseas athlete coming in would do.
I didn't know about the overseas because of the borders.
Just the locals. Yeah. As far as I'm aware.
There was going to be 24 well-known overseas athletes, but COVID.
Rotorua had Buchanan, what's her name? Victoria Buchanan came in, but she quarantined before she raced.
Okay.
So she went through the whole process and stuff. So when Rotorua did Crankworks, they did have overseas riders, but I don't know if they've stayed to be able to come down here.
Then it goes from here, doesn't it, to Monica?
Queenstown.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say. I couldn't make the last council meeting. Things are still busy in the general world. I attended the Duxton High School prize giving by live stream. It's quite different, isn't it? I was very impressed with those kids there. But no, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
I attended the ILM workshop for the museum strategy review. There was lots of interesting discussion there, particularly around museums' role in heritage and how that ties in, and hopefully the museum collective trust will be able to help us define that a little bit more clearly over time. Council's role in museums going forward in terms of whether council's completely hands off and just leases the buildings out to the museums, or whether council has more of a role. The benefits to the community of museums and the costs also, in terms of, for myself, I know I'd like to have a greater understanding of the overall costs of each museum to the community in terms of not just the grants that they receive, but also the operational and capital costs of each building. And funding options, current and future, in terms of, I guess what Melbourne McPherson touched on in terms of whether it remains contestable or goes to a line item in the budgets. I attended the last council business meeting, and an interesting discussion there was the increase in the water treatment plant costs for a number of different reasons. They've gone up considerably for the new treatment plant out at Clyde, from 9 million to 17, as I understand it. And there was an amount of underestimation in the beginning from the contractor who gave the estimate, and the procurement costs and shipping costs have also increased over time. So there was a suggestion that in future for estimates to use to use experts in quantity surveying rather than engineers to do the estimates. There was a waste options workshop and to do with, as Martin mentioned, curbside collections. There's likely to be investigations into an organics processing facility. And that could be investigated alongside Queenstown Oaks. And there was also a presentation on the Alexandra Airport Master Plan and discussion around safeguarding for noise, future development, including electric aircraft in our district planning. And then I attended the last hearings panel meeting by teams for the first part of it, the morning session.
Thank you. Russell.
Yeah, quite a few museum meetings one way or another. Did have a hospice fundraising planning meeting. A couple of Heritage Trust and Promote Dunstan meeting. The Heritage Trust also met with some CODC staff with Glenn Hazeldine and had an excellent session, I must say, with him. It was very worthwhile. They also had a Clyde Museum meeting and the annual general meeting. And in between times, I've given quite a few of the trails a fair bashing on my bike, I've got to say, quite a few. But just a brief comment, it's remarkable just to see the number of people on the New Dunstan Trail on a daily basis. It's quite extraordinary. A comment to on the work that the Trust has done on the surface of the Roxburgh Gorge track from Alexandra down to Doctor's Point. It is being maintained, and that is really, really good. I had been following up with Ian Mann before he left about the surface of the river track, which is, you know, part of the council responsibility. But I have had a couple of people that have actually fallen off that track because of hitting stones and a bit of damage being done to the bikes on the track. But I understand that there's some money in the council budget for some work to be done on the surfacing of that track, but it really does need quite a bit of work done on it in various places. So yeah, a busy month with mainly museum-y sort of heritage-y stuff done. Thank you.
Yes, Russell. I'll move those movement reports. Charlene will second them. Our next item, folks, is 21.9.9, page 151, governance reports. And we have the VCB status reports, VCB legacy status reports, and one from Waiata Theatre Companies reporting back on their fantastic production. Jesus Christ, superstar. Any comments, notes, thoughts? I'll move that report is received. Do I have a seconder? Ian, those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Note date of the next meeting. We'll retire for Christmas trees. Okay. A resolution to exclude the public, please. Charlene?
Yep.
Russell, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Item 178. Okay. Oh, that's right, thank you.